now?
She was literally an observer.
Right.
And I think that I was probably an observer too.
Welcome to another episode of Beneath the Page, the podcast about books and the writers behind them. I'm Steve Couch.
And I'm Sophie Beal, and today we have Paula Harmon with us. Hello, Paula.
Hello.
And she's the author of numerous books. Her main series features Margaret Dameray, who's an Edwardian pathologist. I'm right.
That's right.
But now she's turned her hand to werewolves. Paula, tell us about The Incomer.
Okay, so The Incomer is actually the second novel, unless you count the one I wrote when I was 12, that I ever wrote, but it's only recently come out. It's set in the Highlands of Scotland, and there's a young woman who's moved there with her brother, basically to hide him away. He's become a werewolf. In an instant also killed her husband, and they're hoping for a cure. Go to a small town hoping that nothing's going to happen to them because it's a small town. Nothing ever happens in small towns, and they can hide away. And then they discover the small town has secrets of its own and wants to know why they're there and possibly wants to get rid of them.
Before The Incomer, you mostly wrote historical fiction. What made you want to try your hand at the supernatural?
I think that there's two elements to the way that I like to write, and the bits of me that I tap into, I guess. And I always liked mystery fiction, always liked historical fiction, and I got into writing the Margaret Dameray series through writing another series beforehand. But The Incomer was one that I had, as I say, started a long time ago, and it tapped into the little bit of me that sort of likes to think that there's magic in our world. We've got our world, we know what it is, but there's an element to it that we can't see or we're not aware of, but some people are. And I love that the book itself grew out of what was originally supposed to be a short story with a young woman observing what was happening to her brother. And as time went on and I turned it into a novel, as it grew, she suddenly became her own person, and she had her own story to tell, and it became about her rather than about just her observing. She has to encounter all of this supernatural that she didn't know, this paranormal world that she didn't know existed, and protect her brother, protect herself, and move her life forward, because she suddenly realised, I don't want to be this person anymore, I want to change.
There's an article on your blog about how you wrote it and then put it away, and several years later came back to it, and as you found that it had changed in that time because you'd changed. What had changed about you?
What had changed about me? I think, and I was sort of thinking about this in respect of something else. I had always wanted to write, but I had gone through a series of times where it had been impossible because I had a family and blah blah blah. And when I got past that stage, all of a sudden I had people saying to me, not family members, but other people saying, well, it's never going to happen. You haven't done it now. You can't do it, basically. And it was literally, you can't do it. And then I decided, with prompting from other people, to do it anyway.
Yes. And
then I succeeded. So I think that because of that, I think Rose did.
Yes.
So she's gone through a whole life of going, well, you can't really do this because you've got to do that, and putting her life on hold, and then thinking, oh well, now it's too late, and then suddenly realising, no, it's not too late. I'm just going to grab life by the horns and get on with it.
In the original version, did Rose have less agency than she has now?
She was literally an observer.
Right.
And I think that I was probably an observer too. So I was the person who'd sort of sit and watch the world go by and then write a story about imagining what those two people might be doing, rather than writing about what I was doing.
Yes.
And I think that in the process of getting into writing properly, I stopped being just the person watching those people and thinking of them as outside of myself, and thinking, what if I was her? What am I doing? So why am I getting on that train?
Writing itself changed you?
I think it did. Yes. And I think that owning the creativity that had been bottled up as well, and just saying, actually, this is going to be my main focus now. My children are older. My career's where it is. I've got a bit of time. but also I'm going to make some time.
Yes.
I'm just going to ignore the housework. I ignore the housework anyway, but it really it was even worse. Yes, stop feeling guilty.
There's a lovely irony in the fact that a story that features shapeshifters itself shifted in the time between when you first wrote it and then when you came back to it.
Yeah, I mean, I really literally started off with what was supposed to be a short story, and then it started to grow, and I thought, well, I can't do this in, 5,000 words. It's going to be a bit longer. And then I ended up with 100,000. It isn't 100,000 words now. But I do that with all of them. I didn't realise that's what I was going to do with all of my books.
Oh, you're an overwriter.
Yeah, I'm an overwriter, yeah. The shapeshifter is not human, but somehow she's more human than everybody else, and she teaches Rose what it is to be a human.
Yes,
we're going to come on to that.
Yes,
Oh yeah, we've got questions about that.
I love all my books, but that has a special place, and I think that's partly why it took me a while to get it out, because I was sort of like,
it's so
handing over a baby or something. So unless it's crying, in which case you want to hand it over.
Yeah. One of the major themes in the book, it seems to me, is community, and Kirkglen is a remote insular community, and everybody there is very aware of who's got the roots that go back generations, and who are the incomers who don't really belong and don't get what it's all about. Did any of that come from your own experience of places you've lived?
I think so, although until you ask that question, I hadn't really thought about it. I was born in North London, but when I was 18 months old, my parents moved, and then they moved again, and then they moved again. I don't know why. My dad just got bored with his jobs and moved. And I lived in a series of small towns until we ended up in a village in South Wales. And so I was constantly an incomer, I guess. And I was a very lonely child, but I was just settling down, then we'd move again, and then we moved and ended up in South Wales, where I was very much an outsider. I was 8 years old, come from a very different area, very different type of school, had an English accent in a part of South Wales where being English wasn't great. Other people managed, to be honest. There were other English children in the school and they got on fine, but I didn't. I left and went to university in England and settled in the southwest in Gloucestershire, and then we moved to Dorset, where by this time I had small children, and I had to get to know people. I think the first experience we rented in a little village. The first thing that happened when my husband had been there for a while, but nobody visited him. As soon as I arrived with the children, we had the vicar, the ex-vicar, and the leader of the WI come round and try and get us into things. So literally, the first day I was still unloading the car, and then we moved to Blandford proper, and I had to do all of that. Where's the gym club, where's the swimming pool for the children, and things like that. So I suppose I've always been a bit of an incomer, and I've always been a bit of an outsider at the same time, and maybe that was part of it. Some of the negative effects of being in a very small place as a stranger, but some of the positive things, because Kirkglen's not, a lot of the people there are very welcoming.
Yes.
Most of them are very welcoming, and they want them to feel at home. And then there's this group that doesn't.
Yes.
So I think it's that knowledge. That's what small towns are like. There's always a bit of both going on. And where do you fit? Do you fit straight in, or does it take you a while, or are you always going to be on the outside? So
The Guild is a group of women. They're very into their traditional crafts, very into tradition, and initially they seem just a bit irritating, a bit interfering, sort of busybodies. But slowly over the book it becomes apparent that there's something a little bit more sinister going on. How did you go about keeping your readers unsure of quite what was going on?
Rose being a relatively young woman, and Emmeline being a much older woman. She's about my age, but she seems older, she dresses older, she acts older.
I instantly disliked her.
Yes.
You were supposed
You're
to.
supposed to dislike her. But you just think this is some woman who just wants everything to be traditional. She doesn't want, all this sort of like nonsense of modern fashions and modern hairstyles, and she just wants everything to be as it always is. And so she's supposed to be irritating. But underneath that is something else. And I was trying to feed that in slowly, that what she's trying to do is unpick anything that is, I suppose, from her point of view, is something that needs to be gouged out and got rid of. If you're being,
yes, she becomes obsessive about
she
it,
does.
doesn't she?
And so from her point of view, possibly, she is doing the right thing by Kurt Glenn.
Yes.
But in fact, it's an inflexible sort of like, we've got no space for anything odd. And yet, is she as normal as you think she is?
But there was a lovely sinister mood hanging over the whole book, in that I think when I was reading it, I really didn't know who Rose should be trusting, who she shouldn't be trusting. That sense of unease that she had, and I thought that was beautifully handled.
What I took away from it was the association of power with control and fear.
I think that it's with any kind of club at all, or group of people, before you know it, it's got a set of rules, and that it's a strong group that lets people step outside of that. I've been in situations where I've with a group of people, they're not like the guild at all, they've been lovely people with the best intentions, but their idea of how life should be is very narrow. And if you go outside of that, all of a sudden you're a bit of maybe a disappointment. You may be feared because your influence is bad, you know, and all of a sudden you become an outsider from a group that you used to be inside. It's sort of that kind of feeling that the control of a group, if you're afraid of stepping outside of it. And I think that possibly happens less in this country than it does in, say, I think the States, in when you've got a whole town that might all go pretty much to one church, for example, where being something outside of what that norm is
seen as abnormal.
Yeah, it's abnormal, or doing something or being something that is not part of that, what's perceived to be normal or moral. Or whatever. I think that happens less here, but I think it still does happen, and it can also happen just in friendship groups or in office circles if you suddenly become other. You know, it's
and I think that the role of the outsider is one that authors often find themselves in. I think
by nature, authors tend to be about situation.
We're awkward so-and-sos. Let's talk about Wolves.
Right. Okay.
I loved the sense of otherness, the sense of something distinct from human society that you gave to the wolf pack in the story. How much of that was based on actual research, and how much of that was just you imagining something that fitted the story and something that felt right?
It started out as imagination and what I sort of knew. And then, and I think what I really wanted to try and convey, even at the beginning, was that the wolves have a cohesive. Although the same thing applies to them. If you step outside, you'll be expelled.
Yes, when you were saying that, I was thinking of the wolves,
but the wolves have a cohesive thing. Well, I'm not a wolf, obviously, but that, you know, that you and they have, everybody knows who they are. You imagine, or what their role is. And I suppose I wanted to have that as a contrast to the human world, where I don't think we do really know who we are anymore. And I think we all trying to fit into so many boxes. You've got your work box, your friendship box, your family box, and you're possibly a different person in each one of those, and you might be a different person to each different friends. I don't mean necessarily horrible, but there might be things you tell one friend that you wouldn't tell another. And
I hate mixing friends.
Yeah.
It's always terribly embarrassing.
I had a nightmare about it once when they were all in a football match on bicycles. Don't know why, but it was all these people. And the first thing, I wasn't thinking, why are they doing a football match on bicycles? I was thinking, but they won't like each other. So I think it was partly that. It was to make this contrast of this quite this unit, although Skye is slightly, outside of it, the unit and humans, which are just fractured. But then I had to do some research, so I had to try and check what the unit of a wolf pack was and how it would work. There is a wolf pack in Scotland. This isn't that. So just to get it out there, this is a completely imaginary one.
The ones in Scotland, none of them transform into humans from time to time.
I don't think so.
Do wolves have legal rights? Can they sue you for slander? Not slander. It would be libel, wouldn't it?
I'd imagine they can't sue you.
They might attack
someone.
you.
Someone might sue you on their behalf, I suppose. I think, as well as the comparison between the wolves and the humans, you also draw, I think, a distinction between the human community of Kirkland and what humans are like in the cities. And I thought those three different communities all pass comment on one another. Am I reading too much into that, or was that your intent?
I don't think I sat down and planned it, but I think, yes, I did want to have that contrast. And although, like I said, I've been a country mouse most of my life, I am nevertheless, I was born in London and I work in London regularly, and I have London friends and I did have London relations, and my Scottish side also came from a city, so I was always aware of that contrast between those two lives, or the two people the person I could have been if we'd stayed in London, and the person I am in a country town. And the pace of life being different, and the ability in a city to disappear in a way that you can't in the countryside. No. Everybody knows what you're doing.
There was a quote that one of the wolves says, which I thought summed it up well. We know, and what we know, the rest of the pack knows. There's nothing known which is truly secret, and they're a bit mystified by all the secrets that humans have, and yet Kirkland is full of secrets. Everybody, it seems, has something that they're not letting on, and there's a massive big secret right at the heart of the community. That would you want to live in a human society that was as open as the wolves, where you've not really got anything private?
No, because I'm quite a secret person, and I quite like that. But I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I mean,
there is something appealing about the wolf.
Yeah, and I don't know, because I'm not an anthropologist, but I imagine that some communities are like that in some places, because they probably have to be. Just guessing here, but if you were living in an environment which wasn't a town, it was a jungle or a forest or something like that, where you absolutely, tundra, you absolutely had to rely on each other. You'd probably have to be a lot more open than us, where we can think, right, okay, I'm just going to move now, and I'm going to move somewhere, and I'm going to completely reinvent myself. Small towns are difficult because people tend to know things about you. If you're an incomer, people still know about you. They're still fascinated by you. And I remember once I had, when we lived in Gloucestershire, and I had a car accident. It was a very small car accident. But anyway, about a few days later, the milk lady came round to collect the money, as they did back in those days. And anyway, she said, "Oh, hello, how are you? By the way, how was the car accident?" And it had happened 10 miles away. and still everybody in the town knew. And if you're part of the community, you sort of know that. You know what.
Yes.
But if you're an incomer, you don't realise people are doing that. So
that's an interesting point about reinvention, actually. I've moved around a lot, and I'm really grateful for my ability to reinvent myself slightly.
Likewise.
And be a better person every time I move. The thought of still living around people who knew me when I was in my school. Embarrassing teens.
Yeah. I just not the person I was when I was in my teens. I'm just a very different person.
It's nice to be able to be different.
And,
shape-shifting again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Talking about quotes and things that wolves say, one of them says, "A real pack would not drop away. They would nurture you until you started to heal." Do you think that we've lost that ability as a society?
Yes, I do. I very much
To
do.
stick around when people are in trouble?
Yeah, I think I read something, I don't know whether it's true or not because it's on Facebook, but it was somebody saying that an anthropologist was asked, when do you think humans became human? She said, we found a body where they had broken a part of their leg, which would have rendered them were completely unable to walk for months, and they would have been absolutely useless to the group of people, and yet it had healed and had been healed for a very long time before they died. So the group of people must have nurtured them,
Yes,
even
yes.
though they would have been a useless member of society.
Yeah.
And there's a book called something in Orcadia, I can't remember, with Naomi Mitchell, and it's about the Orkneys and the very, very sort of Paleolithic people, I guess, who are living up there. They haven't even got to the point where they can weave yet. But somebody in the tribe has got so old, as in he's in his 40s or so, that he's allowed to just sit and think. And
that's the kind of role in society I'd quite like.
Yeah, and
we should have had it for at least 10 years.
Yeah. And I think that we have, as we've got more and more civilised, got better at discarding what we don't want. And that may not be, it may not be the disabled person, but it may be, or the elderly person, although it seems like it is quite often now, but it's just the people that don't fit. And so
editing things out like a Photoshop picture.
And so, people that would have been marginalised 50 years ago, perhaps because they were gay, are theoretically accepted now. Is that true? I think you probably have to ask the community, because they probably say not as much as you'd like to think. I think we're not good at looking after each other anymore, and I think we find reasons why we can divide.
Yeah.
You're not quite like me in the way I want you.
There was one thing that you had Rose in her narrator role saying that really struck me. But grief is an island. What she felt and what Maggie felt were two different things. Even David's parents were bereaved in different ways from each other. It's impossible to share, impossible to explain. Given that, do you think are there any broad universal observations about grief that the book offers us?
I think that sometimes when you're in the middle of grief, you're so prickly with it, perhaps, and you're also trying to build up a layer back. You've been, I'm just thinking about when my dad died, and which was probably not long after I started writing this. Life was generally, I just changed roles, and it was all a bit of a nightmare generally. And I was the coper in a family, so I was doing all the organising and so on and so forth. But I just got to the end of my resources, and so I sat down with my line manager in the office, having got back from special leave and so on and so forth. And she said, "So how are things?" So I said, "Well, we've got to brush you with this. We've got to do." I started talking about the office, and she said, "I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you. How are you?" And I just started to cry because, she was caring, and I knew she'd lost her parents, so she sort of knew how I felt. But it was her experience had been completely different from mine because of the method in which they died and so on and so forth. But that moment, meant so much to me that, and I think that Rose has sort of, she's the coper. I think a lot of my characters, not Margaret's not so much, but her sister is a coper in the family, and sometimes they put this shell on and they protect themselves, and they need to break that down to get the comfort that they need, the chance to actually be the child that needs a hug.
Yes. There's a lovely relationship in the book between Rose and another character who is similarly grieving, and there was something really quite moving about the tentative moves they're making to navigate this growing relationship and navigate their own grief, respective griefs, and that I think embodies what you were just saying about the comfort is there, but
you need to be weak in a sense to take. You need to accept your weakness, I guess. Yes. Not be weak. I don't mean vulnerable. Yeah, you need to be allow yourself to accept it.
Yes. One of the things I admired was the even-handedness that you dealt with Rose's brother Simon. He's very self-absorbed, and yet he's not uncaring. He just needs to be it needs to be pointed out to him that somebody needs caring for, and he seems to have growth. He grows as a person throughout
he grows claws and fangs as well.
That's true. He grows throughout the novel. Was that something you paid particular attention to, or did he happen naturally?
He sort of happened naturally, but the reaction that readers have is quite interesting, because some people say, "Oh, I really didn't like him. He was really annoying." My mother said they've got a proper sibling relationship.
Yes.
It's just like
Yes.
it was with my. I mean, I don't. My uncle was not a werewolf, and he
Wasn't he, though?
He wasn't self-absorbed either. But she just said the way they talk to each other, the way they behave with each other is just like.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't got a brother, I've got a sister. But yeah, we'd bicker, call each other names. But yeah, no, he just sort of happened naturally, and I think that was just how he turned out to be. And I also know that for some people, they're not great at understanding other people's emotions. They're just not. And I think we've got much more of an awareness now that is just how some people are wired, and that they maybe need a bit of guidance to get it. But he's his thing, which is wildlife. He's absolutely passionate about that, caring, and and it's his thing. Just not so good at people. And that's just what some people are like. But he loves them. It's just he doesn't know how to say that.
And I thought that his professional success tied in with that tendency, because I think if someone is a little bit self-absorbed, very often that enables them to push.
Yeah, they're just very
to get to where they want to be.
Hyper-focus, really. And I think in a way that he's sort of trapped in the same way that Rose is. It's just neither of them have really realised that, but he's just trapped in a different way.
Hello, I'm afraid we've had to cut it there. It was another epic interview where we had so much good stuff. We couldn't let it go to waste. So next week we'll release part 2, in which we talk to Paula mainly about her Edwardian detective, Dr. Margaret Damay. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
He tends to think of 1910s leading up to World War One in sort of Titanic terms, beautiful dresses, lots of elegance, loads of money. But there was a huge amount of social unrest. There was still...